Hello, we are waiting another maybe 30 seconds or so until everyone joins in. Please bear with us. Okay. See the number of attendees keeps growing. Let me just get started very quickly, and then we can kick off. So, hello everyone, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you join us from. My name is Juan Moreno, and I'm the director of the Bankinter Innovation Foundation. Welcome to this session, part of our Future Talks series of events, where we bring top experts, business leaders, and scientists to talk about how innovation is shaping our future. In previous webinars, we've talked about quantum computing and its applications with Darío Gil, or future developments of AI and its impact on our lives with Nuria Oliver, or about the fascinating topic of the emergence of consciousness from a neuroscientific perspective with Antonio Damasio. And today we are going to talk about the future of communications, about the evolution and availability of new services that are becoming a reality with the deployment of 5G and other communication technologies. And to talk about this fascinating topic, we have with us John Hoffman, CEO of GSMA and lead of the Mobile World Congress. John, how are you? Welcome, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Juan, thank you so much. It's great to be back at the foundation and the FTF. You know, I was part of one of the original Future Trends Forum sessions, and the topic was 3G many years ago. So we've come a long way. We're on our 5G topic sort of today and this time of the year, and I look very much forward to talking a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing, especially around our recent MWC.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, John, that was back in the early 2000s. So long has gone, and definitely 3G delivered on its promise, and 5G is also taking off. So John will share today his insights in a keynote presentation. Traditionally we open up the Q&A round after the presentation. For all the attendees, you can post your questions online in the link below in the Zoom, and we will try to address them at the end of the session. Well, without further delay, let's get started. John, the floor is yours.
Juan, thank you. And as Juan said, good morning, good afternoon, and maybe even some good evenings if we have anyone from Asia joining us. What I'd like to do is sort of talk a little bit historically of what happened recently at our MWC in Barcelona. And so we'll use that as kind of a proving ground for the topics of telecom, kind of where we are, what we talked about, what were the trends, and then I'll finish it up with some of the learnings and then open it up for questions. So with that, let's kick off. And I think we've got a short intro video to kind of set the scene. Once is good, so we'll flip to the next one here. So some of you might have had the opportunity to participate in our MWC program, specifically the one in Barcelona, either this year or in the past. We began the program in Barcelona in 2006. We had been continuous up until 2020, when, of course, we were impacted by COVID. But we rebounded in that last June. We had a program, a kind of a relaunch, if you will, of a small program in Barcelona, and then in February with our MWC, Connectivity Unleashed, which was our theme. So if we look at MWC 22 by the numbers, and this is kind of a busy slide, but let me just highlight a couple of things. So in our heyday, in our big years, 2019, we had over almost 110,000 people attending. This past February, we had over 60,000 people attending in person, which was pretty impressive. And we did that pulling globally from 183 countries and territories around the world. Now that's down a little bit. We've usually been very global, around 200 countries and territories. But we were extremely thrilled to be back in person, and we augmented our in-person with a virtual program that we broadcast around the world, recognizing that not everyone was able to travel. Some of our friends from Asia, specifically China, were not able to get out, and so we did both an in-person as well as a virtual program and transmitted that around the world. Ours is always a B2B, about doing business. And so the program does in fact focus on a very select group. And I'll talk a little bit about it. It's focused around mobility, but it is much more than mobility. So I'll come back to that later on. We do get very broad coverage from the international press. So as you see here in the center, more than 1,600 international journalists were reporting on what happened during MWC in Barcelona. And that does really change the center of our ecosystem from a global to a very targeted MWC Barcelona ecosystem for the week that MWC is in session. Next slide, please. So some of the topics and leaders that we had basically keynotes from around the world in person. Only a couple of our keynotes were streamed live, and that was from our Chinese CEO. So we had, for the very first time, the 3 CEOs from China Mobile, China Unicom, China Telecom, coming to us on stage all together. But unfortunately, with the restrictions on travel from China out as well as in, they did that remotely. But the rest of folks from our ecosystem and from the verticals around our ecosystem were on stage, which was really great. We're a very diverse. We are not as diverse as we want to move toward, but almost 30% of our keynote speakers were gender balanced, if you will. We want to get to 50%. We're not quite there yet. And across our ecosystem, we bring together over 1,000 speakers in our various programs. And what do they talk about? Well, as I said, connectivity was our topic, but then we have 6 subtopics where we talked about technology, our tech horizon, our platform and roadmap for the future. 5G obviously is a big one down in the corner, but the Internet of Everything is extremely important these days. So that's one of the components that makes 5G really kind of hum. FinTech, one of the verticals that we really put the spotlight on this year was the FinTech sector, and how the financial services sector is moving very rapidly on digital transformation. And then AI, also a very strong 5G topic, as well as cloud. So those topics were kind of our subsets, some of our streams that we did some deep dives in. And then some of our leadership and innovation. You'll see sort of 5G, Industry 4.0, telco cloud, advancing AI, sustainability was a big topic. The sector, the mobility sector, has been recognized by the UN as one of the breakthrough sectors from a sustainability standpoint. So we talked a lot about that, and I'll come back to that in the future as well. But then, then the sort of the subtopics, sort of like, what is Meta? and it's a term that you've heard a lot about, but frankly, if you talk to 10 different people, you'll probably get 20 different views of what is the metaverse. And so we did try to explore that a little bit, as well as how are we using our technology for the public good, and can we trust it? So what's the future? What's the future roadmap? How does it fight climate change? And how do we embrace these various verticals? So that's kind of where we were. Next slide, please. Another kind of numbers slide, which was pretty interesting. MWC is viewed as a telco event, a mobility event. But what's really interesting is that most of the folks that attend are not really traditional telco people, and people are surprised about that. So some of the numbers. So 47% of our attendees were from, and it says 46, and I'll explain the extra 1%. We're from the telco sector. What does that mean? So that would be operators, MVNOs, the infrastructure manufacturers, software developers, a software ecosystem, and then we've got about a 1% of folks that are from the events industry. That kind of brings us to the 47%. But that means that more than 53%, almost 54%, were from non-telco verticals. So we have 14 verticals that we actively track that are participating. And that's why in a sector that has seen a lot of consolidation over the most recent years, a lot of transformation that's actually shrinking, not growing, an event like MWC is still actually growing because digital transformation is impacting everyone, from consumers to small businesses to large corporates, multinationals, and that's why it's quite interesting. And we focus a lot about, the innovators. So our program 4 years from now brought together more than 1,000 startup founders talking about what do they need to be successful and how can we help them find markets, access to capital, backers, customers, etc. And it's very much an international crowd. So we do draw a lot from Spain, a lot from Barcelona and Catalonia, but also a lot of folks from around the Spanish business sector, including government. But more than 70% of our attendees were actually international, which is why it's an interesting gathering of folks. Very diverse, very ethnically diverse, very culturally diverse, very gender as well as age diversity. So we're working very closely to try and bring together the thought leaders from around the world. And then one of the things that I'll talk a little bit about later is on the right-hand side, we had 161 delegations to our ministerial program. Representing, a very large 124 countries and 37 international organizations. And why is that important? Well, because some of the foundation for our future successes lie in the regulatory arena, how our ecosystem is governed, how we're viewed, and how we operate across the world in terms of regulation that allows compatibility as well as expansion. And so that program is one that has been really well attended. And frankly, we were surprised that the international governmental participation this year was as high as it was. So some of the numbers, there's a lot of numbers and I can delve into all of them. If you have any questions later on, I'll be happy to talk about them, but let's hit the next one. So these kind of represent our top 100 exhibitors and sponsors, and it's names that you may know and some that you may not. Some are quite well known in Europe and Spain. Some are more international. You're going to find that there's a lot of ecosystem names here that come together. Companies like the infrastructure companies, Ericsson, Huawei, ZTE, operators, AT&T, obviously Telefonica, but SK Telecom, as well as companies that you may not have heard of, Rakuten maybe, which is a new player in Japan. but very diverse, very well attended, and very strong support, both in person, and then obviously some of these folks sent people in person, and then backed it up with their online presence. Next slide, please. One of the new things that we brought together this year, and our focus was on verticals, was something that we called Industry City. And this is a recognition that the Industry 4.0 transformation is very much in full swing, and especially around 5G. As businesses in the manufacturing sector look to automate, they're looking at 5G as a way to potentially open up private 5G networks that they can use in their manufacturing facilities, or just using 5G as part of their digital transformation for communication, automation, and various other components that they're trying to innovate. And so we had a section of our exhibition area called Industry City, and we tried to give a snapshot what's available today, but more importantly, talk about where industry might take innovation as they are digitally transforming. And that was one of our really, I think, kind of strong sectors, windows into the future. Next slide. As I mentioned, startups, innovation is a critical sector for us, and one that we embrace wholeheartedly. Our 4 years from now is connecting startups. This slide is kind of, I love this slide. This is Anna. Anna is an internationally recognized Spanish success story. She has a company that uses this headset that is with sensors using 5G technology, and it is used to treat neurological disorders such as epilepsy, and with some treatment therapy that Anna and her team have developed and are now using around the world. She's able to bring together technology, medical advancements, and help, especially for young people that have neurological diseases that is non-invasive, and using technology in kind of a new way. And that's what epitomizes 4 years from now, where we had almost 1,000 companies participating. They're small, they're startups. A lot of them are based in Spain, but we're also starting to draw from other parts of Europe. And they're coming together to learn best practices, maybe raise capital, find customers, and potentially steal each other's ideas. But it's a great forum. It's a very low cost entry into an ecosystem that maybe they don't necessarily have access to. So our 4 years from now program was a resounding success. And the last two editions, we brought together 4 years from now and MWC together under one roof. In 2019, they were actually separated at different venues because we didn't have space. The COVID era has obviously opened up some space for us, and we were able to bring 4 years from now and MWC together at our Grand Via location. It was a great success story. Next slide. As I mentioned, our ministerial program, one of our hallmarks, it's an invite-only program where not everyone can get in. It's very restricted because we want to have open dialogue and communications, regulators getting together to learn best practices. How are they dealing with something in one region or one country that can be of use to another region or another country? And we augment that with a speakers list that is literally off the charts. A lot of one-on-one delegations get together and talk privately. So we have a lot of small meeting rooms where these folks can get together, and it really is our lifeline to the future, because without the proper regulatory frameworks, everything from spectrum availability to taxation, it is the runway for our future. And we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and I'm told we're the largest gathering of national delegations outside of the United Nations. So we're really proud of that. A great success story this year, as well as our recent past. Next slide. I mentioned diversity. We as an industry, we as a sector are not where we need to be. Diversity is an area that we are focused on, and we have to do more. And so we have, over the last few years, been focusing on diversity for tech, driving change, and it's around various activities. We do everything from recognizing in our awards program, our global program, diversity programs that have been successful around the world. We do roundtables, we do teachings, we do best practices. We brought a summit together, and frankly, we're trying to lead a tech sector that has a diversity issue, and forcing change is not easy, but forcing change is what we will do. We're not there yet, but we are at the forefront of focus on diversity, and we are trying and very thankful that we are making a difference. So our Diversity for Tech program was another highlight of the event. Next slide. I mentioned that we're all about doing business, and doing business in person has been the hallmark of MWC, but obviously COVID changed that. So in 2020, we didn't have our program, and we came back in 21. It was very small, early 22,000 people attended in person, but we broadcast to the world. Well, we broadcast to the world before COVID, and through various partners, the various programs and activities. Even in 2022, we had over 500,000 eyeballs sitting in, watching our keynotes, watching our presentations remotely. And we use Mobile World Live, which is our own broadcast studio and channel to talk to the world. But then we rely on partners. So companies like CNBC, CII4 in China, the African Network Television, they carried our programs, and frankly, we're trying to spread the MWC world to our ecosystem, but as well as to some of the consumer segments. In China, more than 500,000 people sort of tune in and listen to our daily summaries of what were the topics, what were the highlights, and to bring mobility and digital transformation to their ecosystems. So while we very much focus on in-person, we recognize that our ecosystem is diverse. Not everyone is able to attend in person, and we're augmenting with a virtual program around the world. Next slide. Obviously, COVID has had quite an impact on us. If you remember back to 2020, we sort of shocked the world on February the 12th when we announced that we were going to cancel MWC 20, and we were almost ready to open the doors. The good news and the bad news was that we recognized that bringing 100,000 people together from 200 countries and territory was our biggest asset, but also potentially our biggest liability. We didn't know what COVID was. And frankly, it wasn't even called COVID at that point in time. But we recognized that we did not want to jeopardize the health and safety of our attendees, our exhibitors, and frankly, all of our staff and employees. And so while COVID was not, or coronavirus as it was known at that point in time, was not even really identified in Europe, it was a Chinese problem at that point in time. We recognized that there was a risk. And so when we canceled our event, we took a lot of criticism. If you happen to have seen an interview I did on Spanish television in the days that came after our announcement, I said, I hope that we made the right decision, and that, unfortunately, history may prove us right. Well, we all have dealt with the impact of COVID. So we were the first to shut down. We were big news, frankly, globally. Our event is covered quite well in the technology sector, but that announcement generated 5 years of press coverage for us, typical press coverage over the next 30 days. So we were big news globally. not so much about our event, but about what is this COVID coronavirus thing, and we were the first kind of casualty. Well, we came back in 2021 with our first in-person event, and we worked very closely with the Spanish Catalan health authorities, as well as best practices around the world. We proved that we could do it safely and securely. We first did it in Shanghai in February of 21. We came to Barcelona in June of 21, and then we went to our Los Angeles program in the fall of 2021. And it was a test bed. We were trying to learn, how do we bring people together safely and securely? And that kind of culminated in February of 2022, when we really opened the doors for the public to get together again. And we took our best practices and learnings, and we tried to show the world that we can deal with COVID in a safe way. We required masks, we required testing or vaccinations in order to access the venue. We had very strong programs around circulation, social distancing, disinfecting, and I think that we can, hold our head high and say very effectively, we may have been the first to shut down, but we were also the first at reopening. And one of the sectors that strongly attended this year was the events industry. Some of our peers and competitors, as well as colleagues from various events around the world, came to Barcelona to see, okay, how can GSMA do it? How can MWC do it? Maybe I can learn from that. And frankly, we wanted to be the bellwether. We are an industry association that does events. We are not an events company. But and so we do things, kind of differently occasionally than traditional events companies. But what we found was we wanted to continue to be a leader, and we wanted to showcase doing things effectively, and that meant dealing with COVID. And I think we can, as I said, hold our heads high. Resounding success, and something that cost us a lot of money, but we made it happen, and we showed that you can bring people together safely during this COVID era. Next slide. I mentioned that we are very focused on our eco-friendly programs, and for 7 years, our MWC event, as well as our other events, as well as GSMA, have been carbon neutral. We've been recognized 4 times by Guinness Records as the world's largest carbon neutral trade show. A couple of interesting facts. We have been tracking our carbon footprint for many years. I think we began around 2009. So the first thing in order to address your carbon footprint is to know actually what it is. And so we did a lot of studies early on of when we build, when we bring people together, where is our carbon footprint and how can we control it and then reduce it. One of the interesting learnings from Barcelona is that almost 90% of our carbon footprint is travel to and from the event. And so even if our program was using only sustainable materials, and we use a lot, we recycle a lot, 90% of our carbon footprint is actually transportation outside of our control, if you will. But what we chose to do was, it didn't matter. We're going to reduce our footprint for the event, and we have over time continually lower and lower our carbon footprint through innovative use of technology, materials, recycling, lack of paper. We don't print anymore, things like that. But what we do recognize is that we still want to be a good steward of the environment. So we offset through UN carbon credits and purchases of programs in other developing countries to completely offset our carbon footprint. So even though 90% of our transportation footprint is something we can't control, we're taking it upon ourselves to offset that, to make our event completely carbon neutral. And as I said, GSMA, all of our events are carbon neutral. MWC Barcelona is our flagship, our largest, but GSMA as a company has also taken this approach, and we've reduced and then offset our footprint around the world, something we're very proud of. And we work together on the UN SDGs and have been recognized, as I said, by the UN as a breakthrough sector, the mobility sector. Next slide. We use this term committed community because we don't do it on our own. We work very closely with governmental organizations. So Barcelona City Council, the Generalitat of Catalonia, the ministry in Madrid. Those three have been strong supporters of our activities, but many more. So the Hotel Association, the local and regional police, both in Spain as well as in Catalonia. Everything from transportation, so the metros, the taxi associations, the hoteliers, the convention services. It really does take an ecosystem approach to bring together the kind of activities that we call MWC, and one that we're very proud of. This committed community is something that we are fostering, working. I'll come over next week and meet with folks. It's not just a one-week engagement, it's a year-round engagement of making MWC happen. Next slide, please. Oop, there we go. And as I said, it's a program that is focused in Barcelona. So at the forefront of our convening activities, MWC Barcelona. We then moved to Shanghai in June, and then we've announced a relocation of our Los Angeles program to MWC Las Vegas in October. And then we infill with programs called our Mobile 360 small regional programs that we take kind of the microphone and the stage to regions to talk about regional focus areas and activities. We'll have our Mobile 360 in Riyadh in May. Latin America will be in the fall. Asia Pacific will be in August in Singapore. And unfortunately, last week we announced that our Shanghai program, scheduled for the 28th of June, is not going to take place. If you've been following the news, you know that China is experiencing a very strong COVID situation right now, specifically in Shanghai, which has been more or less locked down. We're going, I think, on our 4th week there. So we have made the decision to, well, we've been pretty vague about it, but we say we're not going to host the event this year. We did last year during COVID successfully, but this year we're not going to. We'll see if demand allows for us to maybe put that program on in the fall. If not, we'll probably wait until next year and bring it back. But 3 MWC programs supported by anywhere between 3 and 6, 7, 8 Mobile 360 programs to kind of infill. As I said, we're an industry association that does events. We're not an events company doing events. And so we don't try to do a lot. What we try to do is big, focused, successful ecosystem programs that drive and convene our industry. Next slide. So that kind of, that was the event. And now maybe if I switch a little bit and talk a little bit about some of our learnings and trends. I bring this to you from GSMA Intelligence, which is a research company that I also manage, that is the largest technology research database in the world, specifically around mobility. And this slide is talking about devices, and I thought it might be interesting to kind of hit some of the highlights of what MWC has seen and we've seen through our research. There is as we move into the, strongly into the 5G era, device proliferation is obviously very, very important. You have to have devices, either handsets or IoT devices, and I'll talk about those in a second, to access the technology. And what we're finding is that there's a growing and diverse range of devices, from price points to functionality. Form factors, not so much yet. Maybe the latest form factor, you see some wearables, but the foldable device, which was launched about 4 years ago, and are now kind of hitting the market in mass. That's kind of the newest. As we further develop battery technology, screen technology, reducing power, we're probably going to, in new materials, we're probably going to start to see some form factors that are going to change in the next few years. But proliferation devices for enterprise and consumer use, obviously a big topic around 5G, around AI and eSIM and iSIM, which is moving from that physical SIM where all of your information is securely kept, if you will, on your device, to more of an electronic, over-the-air, updatable technology is some of the things that have been focused on lately. The shift to digital, it's going to change our behavior, multi-device access, bundling of services. All of those are kind of being a strong component of the digital transformation, both on the consumer side as well as on the business and manufacturing side. So we've seen a lot of that. 5G is really a technology that is bundled with other things, AI, IoT, and big data, in order to really access the full capabilities of 5G, lower latency, high speeds, tracking, the ability to focus a beam right to a device and give you very high, safe and secure, but high bandwidth capabilities at fast speeds. Those are the kind of the characteristics of 5G. And so you bring in these AI, augmented and virtual realities, as well as the Internet of Things, IoT, and big data, kind of spinning it all together and doing some neat things with it into the future. So that's a little bit about devices. If you can hit the next slide. So today we have around 8 billion unique 5G users in the world, but there's still room to grow. And so that means it sounds good, you know, there's not quite ubiquitous take up of consumers around the world. So we still have some growth opportunities. If you see this, GSMAI predicts by 2030 that 8 will become somewhere closer to 10. So you're seeing about a 20% growth still possible. But what's really interesting is that 5G is kind of driving that growth. Today, we're at about 1 million unique 5G consumers using the service. Vast majority around the world are still on 4G. You'll see 3G and then some still on legacy 2G systems. But very quickly, that is going to ramp up to more than 50% in the next 8 years using 5G services and devices. What has been really interesting is that if we look at the Gs, and unfortunately, I've been around for all of the Gs, analog, 1G, 2G, switch to digital, 3, move into data, 4, higher speed data, and now 5. The take rate, both in terms of the adoption by users, as well as the rollout of the technology, 5G is faster than any other G. That's pretty interesting. I'll say it again, 5G take-up has been faster than any other G. It usually takes about 10 years, what we found historically, about 10 years for a G to be fully mature. 5G is moving at a very rapid pace, driven by some countries, by some regions. So US, China, Europe has lagged a little bit. We're now seeing a pretty strong take rate in 5G as the buildup. The pandemic has actually, I think, helped as everyone was pushed home, maybe not remote working or to remote working, the ability to connect either to the mobile internet or to, Zoom calls or whatever your technology du jour is for connecting to your business. Mobility has been there. Unfortunately, we were in the midst of preparation, not necessarily for a pandemic, but we were able to pivot very quickly to provide capacity, connectivity, and utilization to allow us, I think, to navigate the pandemic in as best way as possible. I say, think about the pandemic, and if you had been, let's say 15 years ago or 20 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago, what would your life have been like? Keeping in touch with family and friends, being able to remotely work. It wouldn't have happened. I mean, it was the right time, the right place, and fortunately, we had the right platforms to allow us to move in that direction. So we were pretty happy with that, and we're going to build for the future. 5G is the future. Juan wants to talk a little bit about 6G, and I said I can spell it, and that's about it. But maybe we'll get into that later. So next slide. I'm kind of running out of time here, and I want to get some questions. So, if I look at the 5G capable smartphones, we're about 63% of all devices right now being launched are 5G capable, which is great. You have to have a device in order to access the network. Next slide. And when you access, what are you going to do with it? Well, some of the connectivity offerings, content, you want to stream, video, music, sports. You want to have services. You want to be able to move your stuff to the cloud. You want to have it in a digital, secure way. And you'll see some of the percentage growths of 5G over 4G, what our research is indicating. And then from a device standpoint, you want wearables. You want smart homes these days. You want the ability to move things from traditional viewing entertainment to your device, as opposed to, quote, television of the past, I think is a good way of saying that. Next slide. So what are the operators sort of seeing out there? Well, they want to reduce their churn. They want to grow their non-phone subscriptions, IoT devices, the Internet of Things. We really do see that connectivity of everything everywhere as a great service revenue and a device revenue. So those are kinds of the things that the operators are saying. Phones versus non-phone operator sales is they're moving more toward carrying more devices so that they have choice available for their customers. People do find, an allegiance to a brand or to a type. Many people know that I'm a keyboard kind of a guy. And so I held on to my BlackBerry device as long as I could until, unfortunately, my BlackBerry has been sunset in the US. There's no technology now. So I had to kind of upgrade now to a non-BlackBerry device. So I'm in this 5G world now because of a sunset as we take old services, 3G services, and migrate them now into 5G bandwidths. Next slide. As I mentioned, IoT, the Internet of Things, connecting devices is one thing, mobile devices, but connecting other electronics is another. And we're seeing tremendous growth, both consumer and enterprise IoT, growing to close to 40 billion devices by 2030. So lots of growth opportunities. And the great thing about these things is they're typically lower cost. They run in the background, so they don't take up a lot of spectrum, but they give the ability to bring intelligence to non-intelligent kind of electronics. And that's the growth. And that's really what 5G is allowing us to bring. Next slide. And it's my last one. So when you put it all together, this digital transformation, it's about mobility, yes, because mobility sits at the heart. But every industry, every consumer, every business, large and small, mom and pop to multinationals, they're going to go through a digital transformation. Some have already done it. Some are just starting it. Some are thinking about it. And it's across every vertical. And so what MWC kind of brings together is this window to the world of what reality is today, but maybe even more importantly, where we need to go and how we might get there into the future. And connectivity is moving from, I would say, a vertical. I want to talk, right? I don't want to be corded anymore. I want to talk wherever, whenever. I want a video wherever, whenever, to now a horizontal industry strategy where digital transformation is impacting everything from your healthcare to your government services. to your high tech, to your low tech electronics, to mining, to utilities. And at MWC, you know, we strive to convene the leaders, to the policymakers, the regulators, all of our ecosystem, the partners that will make that happen. And that's kind of, you know, how we see the event in Barcelona, but more importantly, how we see and how we have strived to evolve communication. And I think that kind of brings us back to the topic du jour today, which is, where are we headed? Well, we're heading to more personalization. We're heading to more ecosystem verticality across then horizontal, so that you can access all of your information in a usable, consistent, low-cost framework. And frankly, that's really what digital transformation is all about, and what the GSMA and MWC strives to try and do, planning for today and preparing us for the future. So Juan, that kind of runs me through my slides. I think maybe now we've got some questions, and hopefully you found it somewhat interesting, and a whistle-stop tour of MWC Barcelona.
Thank you very much, John. Definitely very interesting, and you have a fantastic global view on what's going on in the world of communication. So thanks very much for sharing it. Let me get started. We have one question here in the Zoom. Let me encourage also the audience to ask in the chat. But we have the first question, which says, you have talked about technology, but very little about humans. How do you see humans interacting with technology in 8 years, for example, especially in regards to human skills?
Oh, well, I was formulating my answer until you did the human skills part at the end. So let me talk a little bit about some of the struggles that I think we embrace. Not everyone wants to be connected everywhere all the time. Some do, but some don't. And I think that as we evolved mobility and the take rate of mobility services around the world, there was a strong desire that everyone wants it all the time. And I think there's a backlash now that says, you know, I want it when I want it, and I want to control it. And that's why I think the great thing about mobility is it's personalized. You can do it. And if you don't, it will potentially start to overtake your life. And I think we've been focused on that. There's an organization that we've worked with the Spanish government, our Mobile World Capital colleagues in Barcelona, called FDS. So it's how do we effectively use and control technology so that it doesn't overwhelm, especially young people and older people. How can we use it in the right ways? So, you know, I guess the first thing is every device has an on and off button, right? And we need to use it as a tool as opposed to letting it control us. And that's what we're grappling with. And I don't think that there is yet a firm consensus on you know, privacy. Well, there is a consensus on privacy. Security and privacy must be paramount, but yet how does that translate to me as a user? Do I get spammed? Do I control it going in or out? My parents are an interesting one in that, you know, they use their device strictly on an outgoing emergency basis. So I know that I never contact them on their mobile device because frankly, it'll be turned off. Okay, that's one way of controlling it. Then other people have an issue of controlling it where, especially young people, they have to have that thing connected to them 24 hours a day. And that's maybe not healthy either. So we're in this transitional, what is the right equilibrium? And I don't think that we've quite gotten there yet, but we're moving quickly. And I hope that it is not a regulated format at some point. I hope that there is still personalization and choice involved. And I think that that's where we'll ultimately get, but still a lot of work to go.
Okay, thank you. Another question, how do you see the role of the different tech regions, tech blocks, Europe, the US, and China with regards to the evolution of new communication technologies? Do you see interoperability? Do you see somehow borders or walls?
So let's go back a little bit in history. So when GSM was first launched in 1987, we signed our MOU and began launching. The first networks were launched in the summer of '91. It was only viewed to be a pan-European system. It was literally not meant to, to be a global standard. It wasn't envisioned that way. There were lots of regional solutions. It became a better mousetrap and very quickly had global take-up. We still had what I call the religious wars at that point in time. One technology, TDMA versus another technology, CDMA, they were not interoperable. It took us to the 4G era to get full global compatibility so that today all 4G networks are globally compatible. Then government. Well, so innovation started in Europe, I think very strongly in the 2G, 3G era. Innovation was driven by the Europeans. 4G probably saw a shift to the US. So the over-the-top players, the Googles, the Microsofts, the Facebooks, a lot of innovation around 4G. Then you started to see companies like Huawei, the Chinese at the late 4G and into the 5G era, sort of taking a lot of lead on innovation. And then you started to see governments become involved. And we are now at a point where the US and China are using mobile technology in a bit of a trade issue and security issue. So we're potentially on the cusp of seeing a bifurcation of what took us, 4Gs to get together, that you're starting to potentially see a bifurcation where, you could call it an East-West, a China-US, or however, in terms of technology and then also, technology leadership. So Europe is trying to get back technology leadership, and I think is investing a lot in terms of trying. And China is the largest communication patent holder, so innovation in China is very, very strong. And the US kind of has been struggling to say, maybe we dominated 4G, but are we going to continue to dominate, into 5G innovation? So it is very much topical right now in terms of who is going to, be the future of innovation and the leaders, especially as we get around to 6G. The Koreans are interested, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Americans, the Europeans. Those are the areas that are going to fight it out, and we'll have to see. It's not clear yet, but 4Gs to get together, and hopefully we don't split back apart, because there's a lot of economies of scale that have driven prices down and ubiquity, backward compatibility, a lot of gains. Let's hope that it's not washed out here.
Okay. Another one, how can 5G impact digital transformation? I think you touched on that, but where will it be more relevant?
Wow. I think as I've participated in all of the Gs, I think some of them are really step change transformational. 1 to 2 was big. Analog to digital, huge digital, just huge transformation. 2 to 3, 4, another one. We brought into the mobile internet data. It was voice at the beginning, then in simple text. And then we moved to, now you do it, I don't know about you, but we do everything on our device, everything, entertainment to shopping, you name it, education, everything is on a device. 4.5 is a transformational step again. Maybe not quite so much for consumers, but for everyone else. So the digital transformation, and frankly, it's being led, it's being promoted as consumer, but it's not. Okay, it's faster, yes. Better, yes. Okay, more secure, lower latency. But then you get into things like, okay, we demonstrated on the stage in Barcelona, I think now 4 years ago, the ability to remotely assist surgery with 5G because of the low latency. Okay, that begins to open up all kinds of possibilities in the medical profession. I talked about industry 4.0 using private 5G networks to set up and control a manufacturing facility to be more automated and efficient. Government, the ability to provide services, to their constituents in a way that they've never been able to do that in the past, and on and on and on. Banking, fintech, transportation. The 5G digital transformation is going to be huge for people, but more for things.
Okay.
Exciting.
Very exciting. I think we have run out of time. I just wanted to thank you again, John, for sharing with us your insights and your global perspective. It's been fantastic. So thanks very much, and thanks also to our audience for connecting and for being with us. Please keep an eye on our website. We will be launching new Future Talks events, and also we're very excited. We just launched our podcast, so we have already one episode out there on quantum computing. So I encourage all of the audience to just listen to it and send us your feedback. Thanks again, John, and looking forward to meeting you very soon again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.